What happens when one of pop music's biggest stars walks onto a daytime talk show, expecting a friendly conversation, only to find herself in the most intense verbal showdown of her career? The tension in the studio becomes so thick you could cut it with a knife. And what starts as a simple question about her latest album quickly spirals into a confrontation that has everyone talking. Before we get into this explosive moment, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think about celebrity interviews that go off the rails. So Katy Perry arrives at The View, ready to promote her new music. The audience is excited, the energy is high, and the hosts are smiling as she takes her seat. Whoopi Goldberg kicks things off with some light banter about Katy's career, her journey in the music industry, and the audience is eating it up. Everything seems perfectly normal. Joy Behar cracks a few jokes. Sarah N. asks about the creative process behind the new album, and Katy is giving thoughtful, engaging answers. She's in her element, relaxed and charismatic. Then Sunny Hostin leans forward. Now, if you watch The View regularly, you know Sunny doesn't hold back. She's known for asking the tough questions, for digging deeper than surface-level celebrity chit-chat. But what comes next catches everyone off guard, including Katy. Sunny starts by saying, "Katy, I want to talk about something that's been on a lot of people's minds. Your recent public statements about feminism and empowerment have been, let's say, interesting. But some critics have pointed out what they see as contradictions between what you say and some of your past actions, particularly in how you've handled certain situations with other women in the industry." You can see Katy's expression shift. The smile doesn't disappear completely, but it tightens. She takes a breath and responds, "I think that's a pretty loaded way to frame a question. Sunny, what specific contradictions are you referring to?" Sunny doesn't miss a beat. "Well, for instance, you've spoken extensively about supporting women and lifting each other up, but there have been very public feuds, very public call-outs, situations where you've been accused of not practicing what you preach. How do you reconcile that?" The other hosts exchange glances. This isn't the typical View interview anymore. Katy sits up straighter and says, "I think what you're doing right now is exactly the problem. You're taking complex situations, stripping away all context, and creating a narrative that fits a certain story. I've made mistakes. I've owned them. I've grown from them. But to sit here and suggest that I'm somehow a hypocrite because I've had disagreements with people is reductive." Sunny responds immediately. "I'm not calling you a hypocrite, Katy. I'm asking you to address the perception, because perception matters, especially when you're positioning yourself as a voice for women's empowerment. When you have millions of young fans looking up to you, don't you think there's a responsibility to be consistent?" Katy's voice gets firmer. "Consistent. I've been in this industry for over 15 years. I've evolved. I've learned. I've changed my perspectives on things. That's called growth. And frankly, I find it interesting that we're sitting here dissecting my feminist credentials when there are actual systemic issues affecting women that we could be discussing instead of playing gotcha with my past." The audience reacts with a mix of gasps and applause. Some people are clearly on Katy's side. Others seem to agree with Sunny's line of questioning. Whoopi tries to interject. "Okay, let's take a breath here." But Sunny isn't finished. "I'm not playing gotcha," Sunny says, her tone measured but pointed. "I'm asking legitimate questions that your fans and critics alike have raised. You've built a brand around empowerment anthems, around girl power, around standing up for yourself. But when it came to certain industry disputes, when it came to addressing certain accusations, there seemed to be a selective application of those principles." Katy leans forward now, and you can see the shift in her demeanor. The media-trained pop star polish is cracking, and something more raw is emerging. Selective application. Let me tell you something, Sunny. Every single decision I've made, every response, every choice to speak or not speak on something, has been deliberate. You don't know what happens behind closed doors. You don't know what legal agreements exist, what personal boundaries I've had to set, what mental health considerations have factored into my choices. You're sitting here judging me based on headlines and Twitter threads." Sunny doesn't back down. "Then help us understand, because from the outside looking in, it appears that the empowerment message gets louder when it's beneficial and quieter when it's complicated." The tension is electric now. Joy Behar tries to lighten the mood with a joke, but it falls flat. Sarah N. looks genuinely uncomfortable. Whoopi is clearly trying to figure out how to navigate this without completely derailing the segment. Katy's voice rises slightly, not quite yelling, but definitely elevated. You want me to help you understand? Fine. The music industry is brutal. It's especially brutal to women. And when you're trying to survive in it, when you're trying to maintain your career, your sanity, your sense of self, you make choices that aren't always going to satisfy everyone's idea of perfect feminist activism. I've supported women behind the scenes in ways you'll never know about because I don't broadcast every good deed for social media points. Sunny responds calmly, which somehow makes the exchange even more intense. I'm not questioning your private actions, Katy. I'm asking about your public platform and the message it sends. Katy cuts her off. And this is where things really start to heat up. My public platform? The same public platform where I've raised millions for charity, where I've spoken about mental health, about therapy, about the pressures of fame, where I've been vulnerable about my struggles. That platform? Or are we only focusing on the moments that fit your narrative? Sunny remains composed, but there's steel in her voice. Those are all commendable things, absolutely. But they don't exist in a vacuum. You can do charitable work and still be held accountable for other aspects of your public persona. These things aren't mutually exclusive. Accountable, Katy repeats, and there's an edge to the word. That's an interesting choice, because it feels less like accountability and more like a public trial. And I'm curious, Sunny. When was the last time a male artist sat in this chair and got interrogated about whether his actions perfectly aligned with his public statements about social issues? This lands hard. The audience reacts audibly. Some applause, some murmuring. Sunny takes a moment before responding, and you can see her calculating her next move. That's a fair point about double standards in how we treat male and female artists. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't ask these questions at all. It means we should be asking them of everyone. Katy shakes her head. But you're not asking them of everyone. You're asking them of me right now in what was supposed to be an interview about my music. And I have to wonder what the real agenda is here. Whoopi finally manages to break in. Okay, I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit. Katy, Sunny's job is to ask tough questions. That's what she does. Katy turns to Whoopi and her response is measured but firm. I respect that. I do. But tough questions should be fair questions. And what's happening right now feels less like journalism and more like an ambush. Sunny's eyebrows raise. An ambush? I asked you about statements you've made publicly and how they relate to your actions. That's not an ambush. That's basic interviewing, is it? Katy challenges. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you came in here with a predetermined conclusion about who I am and what I represent. And now you're working backwards to justify it. You're not actually interested in my answers. You're interested in making a point. Joy Behar tries to inject some humor again. Well, this certainly got intense fast. Should we take a commercial break? But neither Katy nor Sunny are backing down. Sunny continues. I absolutely am interested in your answers, Katy. But I'm also not going to pretend that public figures don't deserve scrutiny. You've chosen a career that puts you in the spotlight. That comes with questions, sometimes uncomfortable ones. Katy's response is sharp. I didn't choose a career in music, so I could be put on trial for every imperfect moment of my life. I chose it because I love creating. I love performing. I love connecting with people through art. The scrutiny is something I've had to learn to deal with, not something I signed up for enthusiastically. Then maybe, Sunny says, leaning back slightly, the solution is to be more thoughtful about the messages you put out there. If you don't want to be held to certain standards, don't set those standards yourself through your public statements. This clearly strikes a nerve. Katy's voice gets louder. So, what you're saying is I should just shut up. I should stop talking about things I care about because I might not be perfect enough to satisfy everyone's requirements. That's your advice. Sunny shakes her head. That's not what I'm saying at all. And I think you know that. I'm saying that if you're going to position yourself as a voice on certain issues, particularly feminism and women's empowerment, then yes, people are going to examine whether your actions match your words. That's not unfair. That's inevitable. Sarah N. finally speaks up. Can I just say something here? I think there's maybe some middle ground, Katy. Nobody's perfect, and I think most people understand that, but Sunny's point about consistency isn't unreasonable either. Katy turns to Sarah. I appreciate that, Sarah. I really do, but here's what bothers me. When men in this industry mess up, and I mean really mess up, they get chance after chance after chance. They get redemption arcs. They get comeback stories. They get standing ovations. But when women make mistakes, when we show that we're human and flawed, It becomes this endless conversation about whether we deserve our platforms, whether we're good enough role models, whether we have the right to speak on certain issues. It's exhausting. Sunny jumps back in again. That's a critique of a system, and it's a valid one, but it doesn't exempt you from the conversation. I'm not asking to be exempted, Katy fires back. I'm asking to be treated fairly, and this, what's happening right now, doesn't feel fair. It feels like you decided before I even sat down that you were going to take me down a peg. The accusation hangs in the air. Sunny's expression hardens slightly. That's absolutely not true. I have nothing personal against you, Katy. I'm doing my job. Your job, Katy says, and there's frustration pouring out now. Seems to involve holding women to impossible standards while calling it accountability. I've apologized for things I've done wrong. I've learned. I've grown. I've tried to do better, but apparently that's not enough. What else do you want from me? Whoopi tries again to mediate. Look, I think both of you are making valid points here. This is clearly a passionate conversation. But Katy's not done. She looks directly at Sunny and says, "You want to know what I think? I think it's easier to tear down another woman on television than it is to have a real conversation about why we hold each other to these impossible standards in the first place. This isn't about holding me accountable. This is about performing righteousness." The words hit like a bomb. The audience gasps audibly. Sunny's face flashes with something, anger maybe, or offense, and she sits forward. Performing righteousness. That's what you think this is. Katy doesn't back down an inch. What else would you call it? You're sitting here in front of cameras, in front of an audience, picking apart my credibility while positioning yourself as the arbiter of what authentic feminism looks like. If that's not performance, I don't know what is. Sunny's voice gets sharper. I'm a lawyer, Katy. I'm trained to ask difficult questions and examine evidence. That's what I'm doing. And frankly, I find it interesting that instead of actually addressing the substance of what I'm asking, you're attacking my motives. Because your motives matter, Katy shoots back. You can dress this up as journalism or accountability or whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, you're using your platform to diminish another woman, and you're doing it under the guise of feminist critique, which makes it even worse. Joy Behar interjects nervously. Okay, this is getting very heated. Maybe we should all take a second to breathe. But neither woman is interested in breathing. Sunny responds immediately. I'm not diminishing you. I'm asking you to reconcile your public statements with your public actions. If you can't do that without feeling attacked, maybe that says something about the disconnect I'm pointing out. Katy laughs, but there's no humor in it. There it is. The classic move. When someone pushes back against unfair treatment, you suggest the problem is their inability to handle criticism. I can handle criticism just fine, Sunny. What I can't handle is the weaponization of feminist language to tear down other women while pretending it's solidarity. Weaponization, Sunny repeats, that's a strong word. I'm asking questions that a lot of people have. Questions that exist in the public discourse. I'm giving you an opportunity to address them directly. An opportunity. Katy's voice rises. Is that what this is? Because it feels a lot more like a setup. You know what's interesting? I've done dozens of interviews in the past few months. Know how many of them went like this? 0. So, either every other interviewer is failing at their job, or there's something specific happening here. Whoopi raises her hands. Ladies, I really think we need to take this down a notch. We're all on the same side here. Katy turns to Whoopi, and her voice cracks slightly with emotion. Are we though? Because I don't feel like we're on the same side right now. I feel like I walked into a courtroom, not a talk show. Sunny maintains her composure, but there's intensity in her eyes. If you feel like you're in a courtroom, maybe that's because you're being defensive instead of engaging with legitimate concerns. Legitimate concerns, Katy says, shaking her head. Let me ask you something, Sunny. Have you ever made a mistake? Have you ever said something you regret? Have you ever handled a situation in a way that looking back you wish you'd done differently? Sunny pauses for just a moment. Of course I have. We all have, right? Katy continues. And when you made those mistakes, did you want someone broadcasting them to millions of people while questioning your entire character and credibility? Or did you want the chance to learn, grow, and move forward? That's not the same thing, Sunny argues. I'm not a public figure with millions of followers and a platform that influences culture. Katy leans forward. So, because I'm successful, because I have a platform, I don't get to be human. I don't get to make mistakes without having my entire existence picked apart. That's the trade-off. Sarah N. tries to moderate. I think what Sunny is trying to say is that with great influence comes great responsibility. I know exactly what she's trying to say, Katy responds, not taking her eyes off Sunny. She's trying to say that I'm not living up to her standards of what a feminist should be. But here's the thing, Sunny. Feminism isn't a checklist. It's not a test you pass or fail. It's messy. It's complicated. It's full of contradictions because humans are full of contradictions. Sunny's response is measured but firm. I agree that it's complicated, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't have standards. That doesn't mean we shouldn't call out hypocrisy when we see it. Hypocrisy. Katy says the word slowly. You keep coming back to that. You keep suggesting that I'm a fraud, that my advocacy is fake, that my beliefs are insincere, and I'm telling you as clearly as I can that you're wrong, but you're not interested in hearing that because it doesn't fit your narrative. My narrative, Sunny's voice gets harder. I don't have a narrative. Katy, I have questions based on observable facts. You've made certain statements. You've taken certain actions. Sometimes those things align. Sometimes they don't. That's not a narrative. That's reality. Katy stands up slightly, then sits back down, clearly trying to control her frustration. You want to talk about reality? Here's reality. I'm a woman in an industry that has chewed up and spit out countless talented women. I've survived by being smart, by being strategic, and yes, sometimes by making choices that weren't perfect. But I've also used my voice to speak up for causes I believe in. I've used my platform to amplify important messages. And I've done all of this while dealing with constant scrutiny, constant judgment, constant questioning of my authenticity. So forgive me if I'm a little tired of sitting here being interrogated like I'm some kind of fraud. The other hosts are silent now. The audience is completely absorbed. Sunny takes a breath and says, Nobody's calling you a fraud, Katy. But when you put yourself out there as a voice on certain issues, you have to expect that people are going to examine whether you're walking the walk. Walking the walk, Katy says, and there are tears forming in her eyes now. Not from sadness, but from sheer frustration. I have walked the walk. I have stumbled. I have fallen. I have gotten back up. I have tried my best to be a good person, to use my platform responsibly, to grow and learn. But apparently, my best isn't good enough for you. Sunny's voice softens just slightly. It's not about me, Katy. It's about the larger conversation around accountability and authenticity in the public sphere. No, Katy says firmly, wiping at her eyes. It is about you. It's about you choosing to use this moment, this interview, this platform to make me the poster child for imperfect feminism. It's about you deciding that I'm the one who needs to be taken down today. And I want to know why. What is it about me specifically that made you think this was necessary? Sunny looks genuinely taken aback for the first time. I don't think you need to be taken down, Katy. I think you need to be asked real questions. Then ask me real questions, Katy challenges. Ask me about my music. Ask me about my creative process. Ask me about what I'm trying to accomplish with this album. Ask me about the messages I'm trying to send to my fans. But don't sit here and act like you're doing some kind of public service by questioning my integrity as a feminist. Whoopi finally speaks with authority. All right, I think we've covered this territory pretty thoroughly. Katy, I want to give you a chance to talk about the album because that is why you're here. But Katy is not ready to move on. She looks at Sunny and says, Before we move on, I need you to understand something. I'm not perfect. I have never claimed to be perfect, but I am trying. Every single day, I am trying to be better, to do better, to use my voice in ways that matter. And when I come on a show like this and get treated like I'm some kind of villain for not living up to an impossible standard, it doesn't make me want to try harder. It makes me want to retreat. It makes me want to stop speaking out at all. Because why bother when no matter what you do, someone's going to tell you it's not enough. The raw honesty in her voice is palpable. Even Sunny seems to soften slightly. Joy Behar says gently, That's a really honest answer, Katy. Sunny takes a breath and says, Look, I hear what you're saying, and I think there's validity to your frustration about the standards women are held to. I genuinely do, but I also stand by my questions. Public figures need to be accountable for their platforms and their messages. Katy nods slowly, and I think there's a difference between accountability and persecution. There's a difference between asking someone to reflect on their choices and putting them on trial for not being perfect. That's the distinction I'm trying to make here. Sarah N. speaks up. Can I just say that I think this conversation, as difficult as it's been, is actually important because this is the reality. Women do hold each other to different standards. We do sometimes tear each other down in the name of holding each other accountable. And maybe that's something we all need to examine. Katy looks at Sarah gratefully. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. We can have these conversations without making them feel like attacks. We can challenge each other without destroying each other. Sunny considers this and says, I take your point, and maybe my approach was more aggressive than it needed to be, but I want to be clear that my intention wasn't to destroy you or attack you. It was to engage with real questions that exist out there. I understand your intention, Katy replies, her voice steadier now. But impact matters more than intention, and the impact of this conversation has been that I feel attacked, I feel judged, and I feel like my years of work and growth have been reduced to a series of gotcha moments. Whoopi nods. That's fair. And I think this is a good place for us to acknowledge that this got intense, but it's also been real, and sometimes real is uncomfortable. Joy Behar adds, and sometimes uncomfortable is necessary, even if it's not fun. Katy looks around at all the hosts and says, I don't need conversations to be fun. I need them to be fair. That's all I've ever asked for, fairness, understanding, the benefit of the doubt that I'm trying my best. Even when I fall short. Sunny meets her eyes and says, that's fair. And for what it's worth, I do believe you're trying. I may have questions about specific choices, but I don't question your overall intentions. It's not quite an apology, but it's something. Katy takes a deep breath and says, I appreciate that, and I hope that moving forward, we can all think about how we have these conversations with each other, because the way we treat each other in public sets an example for everyone watching. The audience applauds, and there's a sense that while nothing has been fully resolved, something important has been said. Whoopi looks at the camera and says, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we really will talk about Katy's new album. The tension finally breaks slightly. Katy manages a small smile, though you can see she's emotionally drained. Sunny nods, her expression thoughtful. The other hosts exchange glances that suggest they're all processing what just happened. As the show prepares to cut to commercial, you can see Katy and Sunny having a brief exchange that the microphones don't quite pick up. Neither woman looks entirely satisfied. But there's a moment of mutual acknowledgement, a recognition that something significant just occurred. What you just witnessed was one of the most intense confrontations in daytime television history. Two strong women with different perspectives clashing over questions of feminism, accountability, and what we owe each other in public discourse. There were no easy answers, no clean resolutions, just raw, honest conflict that exposed deeper issues about how we treat women in the public eye. Katy Perry came to promote her music and ended up defending her entire approach to advocacy in public life. Sunny Host came to ask tough questions and found herself being questioned in return about her methods and motives. And somewhere in the middle of all that tension and frustration, there was a conversation worth having about standards, fairness, and what accountability really means. The interview continued after the break, and while the rest of it was more focused on the music, you could still feel the weight of what had just happened hanging in the air. This wasn't just a celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a reflection of larger cultural conversations about how we hold each other accountable, how we define feminism, and whether perfection should be the price of having a platform. So, what do you think? Was Sunny right to push Katy on these issues? Or did she cross a line? Was Katy's response justified, or was she being overly defensive? This is the kind of moment that sparks debate, that gets people talking, that forces us all to examine our own standards and judgments. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below. Here's a question for you. Do you think celebrities should be held to higher standards than everyone else when it comes to their public statements and actions?